That blue wall that we kept hearing about, the blue turf in Boise, them being ranked number 12 in the college football playoff. A lot of debate about that this morning, how that went down. All of a sudden, Georgia finds itself behind Ohio State. It was just a crazy night watching the returns come in from all across the great world of college football as the first college football playoff rankings came out last night at 6 o'clock.
I thought you were talking about Bowling Green and Maction.
You know, I sent a note to the commissioner of the MAC conference this morning apologizing.
Who is he?
Tim Beckler, I think that's his name.
Okay.
I just was unable last night because of the college football playoff and the election coverage. I just did not have as much time as I typically do for Maction. But I will be back on that Maction bandwagon tonight. We got 2 games that we will go in great detail about later in the show.
What time did you go to bed last night?
About 2:15.
I made it to 2.
Okay.
Well, I bet.
Conrad was a wussy. He went to bed at 1.
Yeah, I was about to say, I made it to about 12:45.
Molly went to bed at 8:45. That's her typical bedtime.
That is my bedtime.
Well, it was a school night.
Yeah, she
Exactly, yeah.
drinks some warm milk, get some cookies, and she
Actually,
goes to
I had
bed.
some tea.
Tea.
Yes.
Okay.
What kind of tea?
Green tea.
Okay.
Decaf.
Oh,
That's good.
that a girl.
I'm like, maybe I
Atta
should
girl.
clarify.
So no matter what side of the aisle you fall on from an election standpoint, it was a very interesting night, to say the very least, a historic night in regards to the election, what took place. I know many of you shared with us yesterday your voting experiences. Conrad, you went and voted after the show yesterday. What was your time in and out?
Who? 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, it was pulled up, walked right in, didn't have to wait in line, grabbed a ballot, gave them my ID, filled it out, and in and out. Didn't have to wait for anything. It was wonderful.
Landrum.
I timed it. It was 11 minutes and
Wow.
46 seconds.
That's amazing. And Molly, it took you hours.
It took me hours.
It took you hours to vote. What was the problem?
Just traffic, I guess. But when I got there, it was like a quick in and out, like 5 minutes. I just had to wait for my mom, because we went in together, and then afterwards, I just drove back.
The reason it took her hours is because
I had to go to Huntsville.
She was in Huntsville.
I know. I was like, man, did you have to wait hours once you got there? I was like,
No.
that's
No,
terrible. But
no,
no, it's just
luckily
the
I did
driving.
not.
No, she drove hours to walk in for 5 minutes and cast her vote. America.
Well,
There
if it
you
had
go.
come down to one vote in the state of Alabama, Molly, we could have all.
Now, how long did
thanked
it take Paige to vote?
you. She said it only took her about, because she went around 5:30.
Because you were
after
worried
work.
about that.
Yeah, it only took her about 20, 30 minutes.
20, 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So pretty
Very
easy
good.
for her.
Very good.
Second time I voted, nobody was in line.
Yeah, I pulled a Dabo. Like I showed up and they were like, hey, you've already voted.
Hey,
Sorry.
did they call South Carolina, or are we still hanging out there in the balance for the election board to get with his ballot
That's
on
amazing.
Friday?
That is amazing.
It is.
Good stuff. All right, 6 o'clock last night. We had the college football playoff rankings come out. Anything jump out at you like shocking or disappointing, or what the heck were they thinking?
Nah,
Missouri.
yeah.
Well, that's top 25.
That's
Not-
top
Yeah,
25,
I know,
but
I know,
as
I know.
far as the field that we have right now, no, I didn't really have a problem. I think it's very interesting to see how they view this Alabama team, and that was a big topic of conversation yesterday prior to us getting the rankings, was how are they going to view a 2-loss Alabama team? And obviously the win over Georgia, they're heavily counting that, and the fact that they're ahead of some 1-loss second-tier Big 12 teams that are behind BYU, and how the committee is viewing that. So I think all indications, Alabama, they beat LSU, they handle their business and win out. They're going to be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, everything's in front of them.
Yeah.
And so many times, even with a 4-team playoff, Alabama's been in the exact same situation. Just went out. What's I got to do? Now, a lot of times you had to, win the SEC championship game. I think that if Alabama puts itself in a position and they don't go to the SEC championship game, but they win out in the regular season, I think they're in the college football playoff. I think they're in.
I agree. I think at that point the question is: are you hosting a game in the
Right.
first
You
round?
might be
or
on
are
the
you
road, but
Yeah.
I think you're in. So, just in case you were watching the election coverage last night of what was happening, Oregon was number 1, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, and Miami. Now, keep in mind, those are your first round buys, okay? Except Ohio State. The reason why, I know it's confusing, but Ohio State would technically finish behind Oregon in the Big Ten. And so, unless you're a conference champion, you are going to have to play in the first round. Okay. So, with that being said, the top 4 seeds, not the way they were ranked, but the top 4 seeds would be Oregon 1, Georgia would be 2. So, I know that's where it gets confusing because Georgia is technically behind Ohio State, but you got to look at the criteria that they have set forth in this new playoff scenario. So, Oregon would be 1, Georgia 2, Miami 3. And then the 4th seed, this is where people are going to have to get used to this, is the 9th ranked BYU Cougars, because they are currently the leaders of the Big 12 Conference. And if they win the Big 12 Conference, then they're the highest of the conference champions. That means that they would be slotted in for a bye at number 4. I know it's confusing, but we'll get used to this. Then coming in at number 5 in the rankings is Texas. Then Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, mentioned BYU, Notre Dame. Bama comes in at 11, and Boise State comes in at 12. Now, Boise State, meanwhile, all they have to do is if they win out, they may jump the Big 12 champion, depending on the rankings.
Yeah.
That's still on the board. If Boise wins out, and depends on what happens in the Big 12, you might see Boise get a first-round bye and be a 4 seed as opposed to the Big 12 champion, which we currently have BYU in at number 4. Did I say that enough to where it's not as confusing as it sounds like it's coming out of my mouth?
No, that makes sense. My question is, and let's start looking ahead to this weekend, what happens to a 2-loss Ole Miss team if they knock off a Georgia? How does the committee then view a 2-loss Georgia team? You have LSU right now in front of you if you're Ole Miss, a team that beats you head-to-head. So I would think that you need Alabama to go ahead and take care of business there, give them their 3rd loss. But does Georgia stay in the top 10 if they lose to Ole Miss in Oxford?
See, I don't think they do because you have to drop them behind Alabama and Ole Miss, assuming Alabama beats LSU, which, I mean, unless you just have half the teams in the top 10 lose this weekend, I mean, yeah, Georgia would probably be the first team out of the playoff, which is wild to think that they could be number 3 this week and number 13 next week.
I'm not trying to get your hopes up too high there, Colonel Pat. But it could happen.
I mean, it could.
And Molly, our resident meteorologist, is saying they're calling for rain this weekend in Oxford.
Yeah, she got her
Check the weather already.
Showing us the low pressure system that's developing in the Gulf.
Now the question is, who does that benefit more? Does that benefit Georgia?
I don't
or
know
does it benefit Ole Miss?
All right, so back to BYU for a second. They're sitting there at 8-0. They're the 9th ranked team in the top 25, but they would be the number 4 seed currently. The 4 highest ranked conference champs take the top 4 seeds, and you earn crucial buys in the first round, meaning there's a scenario, as I mentioned, that Boise could still a Big 12 bye. And meanwhile, you've got Coach Prime sitting there at number 20 off of a bye with a 6-2 record, and they've got a clear pathway potentially to get into the college football playoff.
Can you imagine that?
That makes me ill.
Because in that scenario, which we talked about with the ACC, but yeah, what happens if, Colorado gets an upset over BYU, so they're in the playoff, a 1-loss BYU still in the playoff, and now you have an SEC team that just lost their playoff spot to Colorado.
So let's go back to Alabama.
I want to see it.
I do, as long as it's not Alabama.
You don't like that matchup?
I'll be honest.
Oh, you just don't want them to replace Alabama is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
So under this current makeup of the rankings that we just laid out and the criteria, Alabama would go to Austin and play the Texas Longhorns in the first round. That would be your game. Let's listen to Ward Manuel,
great game.
The athletics director of the University of Michigan. He discussed a 2-loss Alabama team.
Well, we obviously view them as the highest ranked 2-loss team at this time, but you really touched on it. The home win over Georgia was impressive. What they just did against Missouri, at 24th ranked Missouri team. The loss to Vanderbilt on the road at Vanderbilt was something that we also looked at, as well as the road loss at Tennessee, but Tennessee's ranked number 7. But, they're top 20 in scoring. Obviously, their defense is always solid, holding teams to less than 20 points per game. Those things impressed the committee, and in balance, we felt it came out that they were ranked 11th.
Okay, and I'm not splitting hairs here, Pat, but did he just use a pass metric for
Yes.
Alabama
Yes.
and saying their defense is always solid?
Yes. Do I need to remind him that Alabama's defense is still trending to be the worst Alabama defense since 2000?
But they're holding people under 20 points a game, Pat.
I mean, I heard what he said.
That 34-0, though, that is sticking in the mind of the committee.
But meanwhile, they're middle of the
Obviously.
pack in the SEC in total defense. I'm just saying. I mean, that's
No, I'm right. I
you
agree.
want to throw out metrics? I got metrics for
But
you.
the fact that he used a historical.
Yeah, that's. Hey, I told y'all last week, did I not?
Yeah,
I
you did.
told y'all. Just get ready.
And as
It's-
much as we want to see Alabama in the college football playoff, if I'm a fan of another school and I hear that come out of the committee chair's mouth, I got a problem with that.
no doubt,
Oh, yeah.
not one single question.
Because they're showing you they're going to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, even if the actual team this year doesn't live up to what.
Because of cachet
Yes.
and brand.
So here's another thing that really confused me last night, along with the blue wall. This confused me because remember last week when I told you guys that they mentioned that there was not going to be, they were talking about transparency, and they said we've hired a company that's going to provide us data,
Mhm.
strength of schedule. There's going to be 12 data points, but that will not be released to the public. So remind me again who owns the college football playoff? What media entity? Can you remind me of that?
Yeah, Disney, I guess.
Okay.
Technically.
Disney, ESPN. All right. So the person that is the mouthpiece for the CFP, General Clark, who last week told us all on the webinar that, sorry, there would not be a release of strength of schedule. So minutes after the college football playoff rankings was released,